Family YouTube video, wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. Thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. I'm looking forward to tonight's video. First of all, because I didn't get to do one last night, and second of all, because I'm hoping to get some good comments and some good feedback from my main topic in tonight's video. If you jump on here live, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section down below. Make sure you give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so and share the video on all social media platforms. But I'll get to my main topic, which is, why do sports fans continue to get upset when, to me, the more I think about it and the more I look at it, the simpler it gets. Hey there, Marcus. I am fantastic. Thank you for asking. But first, don't forget that last night, Akron beat Kent State 38-17 in the battle of the directional schools. Central Michigan defeated Western Michigan 16-14, and Miami of Ohio defeated Northern Illinois 20-9. It's hard to believe that Northern Illinois defeated Notre Dame back in September, and I believe they were ranked the following week's AP poll, and they're not even going to go to a bowl game. Hey there, Austin. Glad to have you here. And right now we have two football games going on. ESPNU has Ohio and Toledo, and ESPN2 has Buffalo and Eastern Michigan. And tomorrow night we have an old ACC high-flying action with NC State at Georgia Tech, 7:30 on ESPN. Hard to believe that NC State's quarterback, C.J. Bailey, who I think is going to be really good, is listed at 6'6", 190 pounds. And typically, most of the time, you're always listed a little bit bigger than what you actually are. So if C.J. Bailey is listed at 190, he probably really weighs about $185. And to be 6'6" and to weigh 185, you've got to be a beanpole. But I think he's going to be a really good player. Hey there, Mustafa. Glad to have you here. Hopefully you have subscribed to the channel and gave the video a like and a thumbs up. And Austin, I am fantastic. Every day is a good day, in my opinion. And we'll talk about the games coming up on Saturday later on in the week. But my main topic tonight is, as I said a couple of minutes ago, is why do sports fans get so uptight when, to me, the more I think about it, the simpler this is. And that is the whole college football playoff standings. Because, of course, week number 3 came out last night. And we have Oregon at number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Indiana 5, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee round out the top 10, followed by Miami, Boise State, SMU, BYU, Texas A&M. Then we have Colorado, Clemson, Army, South Carolina, and Tulane. And 21 through 25 is Arizona State, Iowa State, UNLV, Illinois, and Washington State. Now, of course, everybody knows by now that I look at things logical. I never get, too wound up either way, either direction. So I can think about things with a level head at all times. And I got to thinking the last couple of days, because I've talked all the time about how, all this playoff poll is something to get people talking, and it works. And people always say, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And then the very next week when the poll comes out, they get worked up all over again. And it's always your team should be higher, your team's getting cheated, your team's getting shafted, this team's too high, blah, blah, blah. And I've said it a million times. It's all subjective and it's all opinion based because there's no parameters on who has to be ranked where. So they can rank whoever they want to, wherever they want to, and there's nothing you can do about it. So getting worked up about it doesn't solve anything, and it's not going to change anything. Hey there, Kazor. Glad to have you here. But I got to thinking, if you follow college football, whether you want to admit it or not, if you don't admit it, you're crazy because it's obvious that college football is basically turned into the NFL minor league system. Every time the NFL changes a rule, college football changes the rule. The NFL put in the target rule a few years back. College football done it. NFL for years has had where the clock doesn't stop on first downs. And there for a long time in college football, the clock stopped on first downs. Now in college football, the clock pretty much doesn't stop on first downs. The college game is now coached like the NFL game. They have a 2 minute warning in NFL and have forever. And now guess what? College football has a 2 minute warning. And don't be surprised if college football in the next year or two implements the new NFL kickoff rule. It's going to happen. Hey there, Sanu. Glad to have you here. Hey there, Timio. Glad to have you here. And the NFL every year has, we know, the playoffs, and they have what you call wild card teams, which are teams that have the best records that do not win their division. This is basically what college football is now with the 12-team playoff. You have the division winners or conference winners, and then everybody else is a wild card team. Well, in the NFL, when the season ends, if you have one team that goes 10-7 and another team that goes 9-8, who gets the wild card? The team that goes 10-7. Why? Because they had a better record. The NFL doesn't say, well, this team that went 9-8, they finished 9-8, but they play in a tougher conference or they had a tougher schedule. No, you lost more games, you don't go. And if they're making college football just like the NFL, they're going to use the same system the NFL does, where wins and losses matter. And I made a comment, I believe it was after the first poll came out, that the playoff committee is pretty much telling you that they're going to punish you more for who you lost to as opposed to give you credit for who you beat, which pretty much tells you that if you lose, you're going to get punished because they want you to win. To me, it's obvious. The name of the game is supposed to win the game. So I don't see why people get so up in arms about it when it's pretty much subjective, opinionated, and you can't tell somebody, hey, you can't have that opinion. It's their opinion. They can have whatever opinion they want to. And secondly, if you don't think wins and losses matter, then why do we even watch? Because you watch because you want to see your team win. So to me, it's very, very simple. I don't understand why people don't understand it. It seems like sometimes the most basic things in life, people act like they're very complicated when the reality of it is they're not complicated. They're very simple. And to me, the playoff committee is very simple. If you lose, you will get punished. It doesn't matter if you lose to the best team in the country or the worst team in the country. If you lose, you will get punished. And a great example of that is, you look at 8 and 9, Georgia and Ole Miss. They just played a couple of weeks ago, and Ole Miss destroyed Georgia. And most of the time, head-to-head matters. But in this situation, head-to-head doesn't matter because Ole Miss beat Georgia and beat Georgia pretty handily. But Georgia's still ranked ahead of them, even though Ole Miss beat them, and both teams have the same record. Why is that? Because Georgia lost to better teams than Ole Miss lost to. So in that situation, the head-to-head does not matter because Georgia lost to better teams. But yet, people get so uptight about where this team's ranked at. If you don't like being ranked where you're ranked at, Don't lose. Like, I'm a Clemson fan right now, and I have no desire to see Clemson go to the playoffs. None whatsoever. I know they say anything can happen in the playoffs, but I've seen Clemson play. Clemson's not beating Oregon. They're not beating Ohio State. They're not beating Texas. They're not beating Penn State. They're not beating Indiana. They're not beating Notre Dame. They're not beating Alabama. We know they're not beating Georgia. They're not beating Ole Miss. They're not beating Tennessee. They're not beating Miami. They're not beating Boise State. They're not beating SMU. They're not beating BYU. They're not beating Texas A&M. So why go to the playoffs? I would rather them not go to the playoffs and go to a bowl game, and depending on who they play, have a chance of winning than to go to the playoffs and get beat like Georgia beat you. What's the point? And, people say this playoff's going to expand, and it might, but I think even if it does, it'll eventually go back down to 6 or 8. And the reason why I say that is if you followed college football since the 14 playoffs started, most years there's not 4 good teams in America. Most of the time you have 2, maybe 3 good teams, and the 4th team you're like, they suck. They shouldn't be there, but you've got to put 4 teams in. And most of the time, the first round of the playoffs are terrible. They're all blowouts. You're not helping college football, and you're not going to make money when you put 12 teams in the playoffs and the first round games are always blowouts because the bottom 3 or 4 teams have no business being there. After a while, people are going to quit watching because they know the first round games are going to be blowouts. And secondly, no, you don't have 12 good teams because you barely have 5 good teams. But secondly, it's obvious that in 5 or 6 years, there's going to be 2 conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, which to me is still an idiotic thing to do. But that's going to happen. You don't need a 14-team playoff or a 16-team playoff when it's going to be half the Big Ten, half the SEC. That's stupid. So it might expand to 14 or 16 for a year or 2, but then it's going to go right back down and shrink down to 6 or 8. You don't need a 16-team playoff and have 8 in the Big Ten and 8 in the SEC. That's dumb. But I've made the comment on here many a times that you think about Georgia and Texas A&M. Since Texas A&M joined the SEC, I don't think they've played Georgia at all. Maybe they played 1 year that I've forgotten about, but off the top of my head, they haven't played at all. Georgia never plays Arkansas, and they're in the same conference. I just don't understand what's the point of having somebody in your conference that you're not going to play. That's dumb. Georgia could schedule Texas A&M in a non-conference game and play them quicker than they play them in the same conference, and that is absolutely stupid. And now you see this year why it's stupid, because you're going to have all these teams in the SEC that are going to finish tied with 2 losses, and the first tiebreaker is head-to-head, but guess what? You didn't play each other. If your conference wasn't so stinking big, everybody play everybody, and that tiebreaker would be so much easier. The Big 12 for a long time had 10 teams, and they had a round robin. Everybody played everybody. So in the season, if you had 2 or 3 teams tied, guess what? Head-to-head matters. But when you don't play each other, you can't use that. That's just another bad example of why expanding the conference is stupid. It's dumb. It makes no sense. You got 45 teams, you play 8 of them. That is stupid. What's the point of having a team in your conference and you're not going to play them? I thought the point of the team was to play them. If you're not going to play them, why are they there? It makes no sense to me. And in case you have not heard, Jim McElwain, who of course used to a long time ago be the head coach at Florida, announced earlier today that he was retiring. He's been in the game 40 plus years, but he has now been mentioned in the whole Michigan Connor Stallions thing. So I'm thinking that's probably why he's retiring. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. My friend bought a wig at a second-hand store. It was a small price to pay. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.